But we should know that it is more. It's death and dying. It's life and living. It's about love. And life and death and love all take practice. So when I was in seminary in 2016, the day after the results of the presidential election that year, a bit of a pall had been cast over the seminary. I think it's fair to say that most people had expected Secretary Clinton to win that election, but history just didn't work out that way. And at chapel that day, the celebrant, the preacher, the acolytes, the altar servers, everyone who was serving in the Mass was a woman. No doubt because of the anticipation of celebrating the shattering of another glass ceiling. And yet in that moment we felt an extreme disappointment. Many were apt to express their fears, some of which indeed have come to pass. Many more expressed their disappointment or anger or frustration, and I can't remember much else from the service, except that seeing the women at the altar in the context of the election made the service feel less like a celebration and more like a funeral. And this general mood continued into the lunch that we all shared after the service, as was our custom on Wednesdays. And our normal Wednesday lunches were usually pretty raucous, but this one you could hear a pin drop. And then, as he did every week, Bishop Alexander, our dean, got up to make the weekly announcements. Normally, this would be a time for letting us know what was coming in the week ahead, or showering praise on something that had happened the week before, whatever it may be. But this time was different, and he stood up there, he had his Bible with him, and he began to say, I know that most of you are disappointed in the results of last night's contest, and I want to share with you what I think you'll need in your lives and in your ministries as you go forward into the days and years ahead. And then he began to read from Romans. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. In particular, he commended to us verse 10 of this chapter. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Some of us who are a bit more competitive made this into a contest. Everywhere we went, we were keen to outdo each other in showing honor. Often this looked like paying for the meal before the check comes, so that when the check showed up, it was already paid for and everybody's looking around wondering who done it. Or maybe it involved doing a favor for someone without them asking. For example, one person had complained that they had to mow their yard that day and they showed up to a mowed yard. And what developed among us was this culture of deep listening, not just to what was said, but to what was left unsaid. There was an understanding that developed, the kind that grows among friends or the people that we love. And my favorite thing was that whenever a good deed was discovered, the person who received the gift or the good deed would look around and say, okay, who just Romans 12:10'd me? And while last week I talked about how we're called not to worry but to faith, not to scarcity but to abundance, this week I want to highlight that there is no better way to practice this renewing of the mind than with each other. Love one another in mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Those words are written to you, to Holy Cross. You might invite the person in the pew with you to sit with you at lunch today. Or on another Sunday, you might invite them to go somewhere for lunch. You might invite them to sit down for coffee. You might have them over to the house to bake a cake. I don't know what you would do, but there's many things to be done. You might have your families get together for dinner. Whatever the activity, it is through time spent together with others that we learn to listen deeply to both what is said and what is unsaid. And this offers yet more opportunities to escape yourself, your worries, your fears, by making yourself available to soothe the soul of another. And in the process, you might find that your soul is also soothed. Additionally, as Jesus teaches us today in the gospel reading, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. By emptying ourselves in love for the other, we make space for God to move within and through us. Through selflessness, we find our true selves, the person that God has made us to be. It seems unreasonable to think that who we are truly lies outside of ourselves. But who we are depends entirely upon who God is. And if we're to be our true selves, we must learn to let Christ shape us into that full measure of the stature of Christ. Now, there is a place for introspection in all this, but the goal of looking inward is to learn to look outward with fresh eyes, with a new vision for who all of us are. In discovering the light of Christ within us, we are then able to see it in others and to show others those unveiled faces of mutual affection. But this is not about just being nice people. It's more than that. It's costly. It's giving up who you think you are. It's giving up the comfortable fables and cleverly devised myths that we all prefer about ourselves or about our neighbors, and confronting, as though through crucifixion, the reality of our present dilemma. To become who we have always been, we must let go of who we think we are. Like moths to a flame, we fly into that uncreated light, but what remains is not us as we understand ourselves or as others understand us, but what is left is us as we truly are. And to prepare for that moment, at the dusk of our lives, when we shall fully know even as we are fully known, we plant the seeds of love through mutual affection. Because if we cannot love or receive love from our neighbors, from others, how can we expect to give love to God? How can we expect to receive his love, not because he won't give it to us, but because we will be blind to it? As St. Paul reminds us earlier in Romans 5, and this is love, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That was Peter's problem, you see. Jesus was describing the greatness to the degree of God's love in that God is willing to suffer death, even death on a cross, to free us from death. And Peter, in his blindness, says, "God forbid it, Lord." But after his denial, his fleeing, after his years as a leader of the church in which his vision of God's love for us expanded to include everyone, after life in the community which shared all things in common, after learning to carry his cross for the rest of his life, Peter finally approached that day that Jesus warned him about, when someone fastened a belt around him and carried him where he did not want to go. And he whom Jesus called both rock and Satan finally understood the love of Christ for him as he went to his cross for Christ. We like to think that the life of faith is a matter of saying some words, a slightly different bath, maybe, some casual magic. But we should know that it is more. It's death and dying. It's life and living. It's about love. And life and death and love all take practice. They all take falling down and getting up again until we fall for the final time. And then get up one last time to love and be loved as time passes away in the light of God. But until that unending day, let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer.